You've found nightfall murmurs. When day fades into silence, the world begins to whisper. Some stories come as murmurs, some as warnings, but they all come at night. Don't be afraid to listen, but never listen alone. The memory clings, unwelcome, of that initial passage into the hotel's time-worn vestibule, an air thick with dormancy, smelling faintly of dust and decades past, pressed in. Above the check-in counter, solitary and stark, a single bulb engaged in a fitful, rhythmic tremor. Fatigue had settled deep in my marrow after a protracted day of negotiations. Yet an indefinable wrongness permeated the atmosphere. I dismissed it. The rates were negligible, the location ideal, and oblivion on a mattress was my sole objective. So, I registered, oblivious to the nights ahead, nights destined to be punctuated by voices adrift in a vacant passageway. My name is Elias. Commerce dictates my perpetual motion, and modest lodgings typically suffice. Sleep and ablutions are their only required functions. That particular evening saw me arrive under the cloak of 10 o'clock. Presiding over the desk was a man whose middle years were etched onto his face and echoed in the creases of his shirt. He informed me, with a distinct lack of enthusiasm, that only the third floor held vacancies. A shrug was my reply. It mattered little. My signature sprawled across the ledger, and in return, I received not a plastic card, but a cold brass key, heavy and antiquated. Room 312. The ascent was via a lift cage of rattling metal, complete with a grating inner gate that protested loudly against its vertical journey. With each floor passed, a palpable shudder coursed through the compartment. The illumination within was weak, casting my reflection, pale and drained, onto the burnished steel walls. Upon reaching the third floor, the doors groaned open onto a corridor, stretching into dim infinity in both directions. Beneath my feet, the brown carpet bore the dark cartography of ancient spills along its edges. The wallpaper, once perhaps a cheerful cream, now presented a sallow, peeling facade. And the silence, it was absolute, a heavy stillness broken only by the amplified echo of my own footfalls, advancing toward my designated room. Room 312 materialized on the right, adjacent to a small forlorn table burdened by a vase coated in a fine gray film. The scent of aged linen hung in the passage. The key turned with a stiff click, admitting me to a compact space. A narrow bed hugged one wall. Opposite, a single window stood sentinel, shrouded by a thick curtain that barred the intrusion of streetlights. A lone chair huddled near the window, companion to a dresser whose mirror offered a clouded, imperfect reflection. The faint perfume of old wood and disuse filled the air. My suitcase landed with a soft thud on the bedspread as I shed my jacket. A cursory inspection revealed an absence of bottled water. Resigned, I sought hydration from the bathroom tap. Turning the faucet yielded a brief hiss before the water ran clear, though carrying a distinct metallic tang. Too weary to object, I drank, brushed my teeth, prepared for slumber, and extinguished the lights. Darkness enveloped me, accompanied by the low hum of the air vent and the sporadic ticking of the old heating pipes. I surrendered to the quiet, closing my eyes. Around the witching hour, thirst resurrected me. The room felt oppressive, heated to a stuffy warmth. My throat was parched. Sitting up, I rubbed the sleep from my eyes and became aware of a sound, faint, furtive, like a whisper slithering through the silence. It resembled hushed conversation from an adjacent room, easily explained by thin walls, I reasoned, yet something felt amiss. I rose, padding barefoot to the door and easing it open. The corridor lights cast long, weak shadows. The whispering intensified slightly, though the words remained indistinct, a low, unintelligible murmur, as if someone were confiding secrets to the air itself. It seemed to emanate from the vicinity of room 314 next door, yet no sliver of light showed beneath its door. The hallway stretched before me, utterly deserted. A peculiar chill traced its way up my spine. Then, abruptly, the sound ceased. I proceeded to the communal bathroom at the corridor's end, procured more metallic water, and retreated to my room, the lock clicking shut behind me. Sleep proved elusive. My thoughts snagged on that phantom susurrus, imagining a restless neighbor pacing, waiting for the sound's return. But only silence answered. Morning found me downstairs, seeking caffeine in the lobby. The same clerk, looking only marginally more alert, occupied his post. Casually, I inquired about room 314, mentioning the nocturnal voices. He regarded me with a flat stare for several seconds before offering another dismissive shrug. No one occupied 314, he stated plainly. He conceded, however, that complaints about nighttime conversations were not uncommon, though their source remained perpetually undiscovered. His explanation concluded there. I lingered, anticipating more, but he merely took a slow sip of his coffee, his gaze drifting away. Unease prickled at me. Shaking it off, I departed for the day's obligations. The hours bled away, and by 7 that evening, I was back, a takeaway burger clutched in hand. I consumed it within the confines of my room, the hallway outside blessedly silent. I tried consciously to banish the memory of the previous night's anomaly. The television offered only fuzzy distractions, channels flickering past in a meaningless parade. I settled on a local news broadcast, its drone a thin layer of sound against the room's inherent gloom. By 10, I surrendered to the need for rest, switching off the television, but leaving the bathroom light on, its pale glow spilling through the partially open door, a small concession to the oppressive atmosphere. I lay scrolling through my phone, the mattress springs groaning beneath me, the pillows feeling insubstantial. Sleep eventually claimed me, despite the discomfort. Hours later, my eyes snapped open. The sound, that same insidious murmur. My heart gave a painful leap, its frantic rhythm echoing in my ears. It originated from the hallway again, a low, sibilant stream of whispers, seemingly just outside my door. Breathing deliberately, shallowly, I sat bolt upright, straining to listen. It never crescendoed beyond that hushed tone, yet its proximity felt invasive. I swung my legs over the side of the bed, the floor cool beneath my feet, and crept towards the door. My mouth was desert dry, my palms slick with nervous sweat. Pressing my ear to the wood, I listened intently. The voice persisted, a monotonous drone, utterly indecipherable. Masculine, perhaps? Impossible to discern with certainty. Drawing a steadying breath, I turned the lock and eased the door open a fraction. Dim light, empty space. I pulled the door fully open and stepped into the corridor's hush. The whispering receded, fading to an almost imperceptible breath of sound. Tentatively, I advanced a few paces towards 314, placing my ear against its cool, unresponsive surface. Silence. My gaze swept the length of the hallway, the distant elevator, the crimson beacon of the exit sign, the uniform row of closed doors. Nothing stirred. Retreating to my room, I secured the lock, my arms rigid with tension, a film of perspiration dampening my brow. I switched on the main light, perched on the edge of the bed, and waited. 5 minutes crawled by. Then it returned, muffled now, seeming to emanate from within the very structure of the building, perhaps the walls themselves. I fumbled for my phone, activating the recorder, capturing seconds of charged silence, hoping to ensnare the phantom voice. Playback revealed only the ragged sound of my own breathing. A tremor ran through me. I wasn't hallucinating, of that I was certain, yet tangible proof remained elusive. The following day brought another conversation with the clerk. His response was a familiar, minute shrug. "Happens sometimes," he offered, his tone flat. "No one ever figures it out." My attempts to elicit further information were met with the same weary indifference. It had been occurring for years, he admitted. It was why the third-floor rooms often remained unoccupied. Why rent them at all, I pressed, if they provoked such consistent disturbance? People rarely stayed long, he countered, and management displayed a profound lack of concern. I inquired about relocating, but a citywide conference had rendered every other room unavailable. Trapped. The company had footed the bill. Relocating at my own expense felt punitive. I resolved to endure. Earplugs, perhaps, the television's constant drone as a shield. Yet a stubborn part of me, the part that detests inexplicable phenomena, yearned for resolution. That evening, returning from another taxing day, the hotel felt heavier, the air imbued with a palpable weight. A hot shower and leftover takeout did little to dispel the oppressive sense of anticipation. Attempting productivity on my laptop proved futile. The sluggish Wi-Fi rendered the effort glacial. I surrendered, the conviction solidifying that the moment darkness fell completely, the whispers would resume their vigil. Midnight approached, my eyelids heavy. I extinguished the bedside lamp, leaving the bathroom door ajar once more, its weak light a meager defense against total blackness. I closed my eyes, tuning into the monotonous hum of the ventilation. Perhaps an hour drifted by before the sound returned, that quiet, persistent sibilance. This time, it felt unnervingly closer. Sitting up sharply, my heart hammered against my ribs, a constricting pressure tightening in my chest. I focused, straining to decipher the sound. Gooseflesh prickled my arms. The nape of my neck felt icy. Rising, I pressed myself against the door again. The whisper was immediate, intimate, as if someone stood directly outside, lips near the wood, murmuring an endless, incoherent litany. A surge of frustrated anger overcame me. I wrenched the door open, prepared for confrontation. Nothing. Emptiness greeted me. Left, right. The corridor remained static, deserted. My anger dissolved into a raw, exposed nervousness. Standing there in my sleepwear, I scanned the desolate expanse. I even strode down to the window at the far end, peering around the corner, seeking any hidden alcove or lurking figure. Futile. Every door remained shut. The elevator indicator confirmed its slumber on the ground floor. My pulse throbbed violently in my chest. The urge to shout into the void was strong, yet the thought of disturbing other guests restrained me. Hurriedly, I retreated to my room, slamming the door, engaging the lock, and sliding the chain across for good measure. My mind, now hyper-alert, refused solace. I lay rigid in bed, muscles coiled, eyes fixed on the door, half expecting the knob to turn. An attempt to distract myself with my phone failed. The weak signal offered no escape. Eventually, exhaustion dragged me into a shallow, troubled sleep. On my final night, a profound weariness preceded me even as I ascended to the 3rd floor. The day had been fraught with stress. My tolerance for spectral disturbances was non-existent. Returning at 9, clutching a cold soda from a nearby shop, my strategy was simple. Remain conscious until sheer depletion rendered me immune to any nocturnal sounds. I sat on the bed, the television flickering with snowy reception, sipping the soda. The local news anchor spoke of a looming heat wave. The words barely registered. Emails were checked, nothing demanding attention. Around 11:30, distinct footsteps echoed softly in the hall. They halted near my door. A jolt, sharp and electric, shot through me. I muted the television, listening with painful intensity. The low whisper resumed, but this time it was punctuated by a soft, hesitant knock, like fingertips lightly brushing the wood. My heart seized. Moving with deliberate silence, I approached the door, torn between opening it and remaining frozen. The tapping persisted for a few more seconds, then ceased. Silence descended once more. I stood immobile, my breathing rapid and shallow. A minute passed, perhaps 2. Nothing. With trembling fingers, I disengaged the deadbolt and opened the door just a crack. No one. The corridor lights pulsed faintly. No evidence of any presence. "Hello?" I whispered, my voice swallowed by the stillness. Opening the door wider, I stepped out. The hallway yawned, vacant as ever. The air felt unnaturally cold against my exposed skin. A quick check near the elevator confirmed the emptiness. I returned to my room, locking the door for the final time. Sleep that night was a fragmented affair, punctuated by phantom creaks and whispers that seemed to drift, unlocatable, sometimes overhead, sometimes in the hall, sometimes seemingly within the walls themselves. By 5 a.m., I conceded defeat. I packed swiftly, showered, and descended to the lobby's muted light. The clerk was there. "Get any rest?" he inquired, his tone betraying the expected answer. "No," I replied. He nodded, a gesture heavy with the weight of countless similar complaints. "Sorry," he mumbled, looking as fatigued as I felt, resigned to the hotel's enduring peculiarity. Checkout was swift. A taxi waited. As it pulled away from the curb, I glanced back at the hotel's facade, the dull eyes of its windows, the weathered brick. Relief washed over me, potent and cleansing, though the tension lingered in my shoulders, a dull ache behind my eyes from sleep deprivation. My mind replayed the insidious whispers, a loop I consciously tried to sever. There was a plane to catch, work awaiting. Yet the place resurfaces in my thoughts intermittently, those long, dim corridors, the unsettling voice in the night. Knowing others have shared the experience offers little comfort. I will never return. A lesson learned in the currency of unease. Convenience and economy are poor compensation for nights spent wrestling with unseen, unheard presences. Should whispers ever again bleed through a hotel wall, proximity will be sacrificed, cost disregarded. That third-floor haunting is an experience I have no desire to repeat. I never fathomed that securing a simple storage space, a cavern of corrugated metal and concrete, would curdle into the most profoundly disquieting chapter of my existence. My trade demanded volume, space for lumber stacks, sacks of aggregate, the growling machinery of construction, and I craved a sanctuary for weekend tinkering, a place liberated from domestic constraints of noise and sawdust, a pragmatic necessity, nothing more. By daylight, the warehouse was merely utilitarian, a vast, echoing shell lined with skeletal shelving units. But twilight bled the ordinary from it, ushering in something else entirely. The ink dried on the lease perhaps 3 months past. Silas, the proprietor, presented an air of straightforwardness, assuring me the structure was sound, untroubled by prior occupants. The rent felt equitable, the location a mere quarter-hour's drive from home. My initial survey revealed the expected, a broad, roll-down steel maw secured by a hefty padlock leading into a single artery of a corridor branching between towering racks of steel. 7 feet tall they stood, regimented in parallel lines, carving narrow canyons between them. I recall that first Saturday morning, breaching the warehouse's quietude with my pickup. Unlocking the shutter, the metallic groan echoed briefly before I began the grunt work of hauling. Bags of Portland cement like dense gray pillows, cartons spilling fasteners, the coiled serpents of extension cords, the weighty repose of power tools, rough sawn planks, an utterly mundane ballet. Inside, the fluorescent tubes overhead blinked awake with a low, resonant hum, casting a sterile, faintly bluish pallor upon everything. It wasn't welcoming, but functionality was the goal. A concrete expanse, ranks of metal. What more was there to see? I commandeered a corner for my tools, stacked scrap timber onto a lower shelf, and arranged the cement near the entrance. My plan involved returning the following day, eager to commence shaping wood into a simple bench. I lingered a couple of hours, drilling test holes, gauging structural soundness, assessing airflow. Locking up that afternoon, the place felt utterly benign, neutral, normal. The first tremor of the uncanny arrived about a week hence. Dinner concluded, I realized a fresh box of galvanized nails remained forgotten in the truck bed. Rather than ferry it indoors, a detour seemed simpler. A quick stop at the warehouse, I reasoned. It was past 8. Dusk had already surrendered to full night. Arriving, I wrestled the lock, slid the heavy door aside, and stepped into the immediate darkness before finding the switch. The instant the fluorescence sputtered to life, a faint tink resonated from the deeper recesses of the building, a diminutive metallic chime like a dropped coin skittering against steel. I froze, straining my ears against the sudden silence that followed. Nothing. Metal cooling, I told myself, or something settling on a distant shelf. An easy dismissal. I navigated the aisles to my designated spot, deposited the nail box, performed a cursory check on my equipment. All seemed undisturbed. Yet as I turned to depart, a distinct squeak cut the air. I pivoted, scanning for a loose hinge, a leaning pipe. Again, only profound stillness. A shrug, a turn of the key, and I drove home, the minor anomalies already fading. The subsequent weekend found me immersed in creation. I arrived mid-morning, eager to wrestle planks into the form of a bench. The whine of the circular saw, the rhythmic rasp of the sander filled the cavernous space for hours. By 6, satisfied with the nascent form taking shape, I departed. The warehouse had been cooperative, silent save for the sounds of my own labor. A perfectly unremarkable session. That very evening, around 9, a prickle of unease surfaced. I'd left my expensive router exposed, not secured within its cabinet. Prudence dictated a return trip. Theft, however unlikely, was a needless risk. The approach felt different this time. The parking area lay submerged in near-total darkness, punctuated only by the lonely sodium glare of a distant street lamp. The air possessed a palpable chill. Parking, I retrieved a flashlight from the glove compartment before entering. The overhead lights hesitated, flickering erratically before achieving a stable, cold glow. And then I heard it, undeniably this time, a metallic scrape emanating from the labyrinthine depths between the shelves. It evoked the sound of a heavy chain being dragged, languidly, intermittently, across the bare concrete floor. My breath hitched, my heart hammered against my ribs. I stood utterly still, listening intently. The sound ceased. The building settling, I insisted inwardly, a resonant echo from outside. I forced my legs toward the tool cabinet, unlocked it, secured the router, and relocked the door, consciously suppressing the rising dread. Turning back towards the exit, the sound erupted again, closer now, and distinctly louder. I halted mid-stride. The dragging, grating noise seemed localized to the third aisle. My flashlight beam sliced through the fluorescent haze, illuminating only the impassive steel frames, the dust motes dancing in the still air. No movement, no discernible source, yet the sound persisted, vivid and grating. A metal rod perhaps, or a length of chain, pulled deliberately across the floor. A knot tightened in my gut. My mouth felt like parchment. "Hello?" I called out, my voice thin in the vastness. "Is anyone there?" Silence answered. Rationality warred with instinct. Slowly, deliberately, I advanced down the third aisle, flashlight beam probing every shelf, every shadow. Nothing amiss. The racks were immovable, no loose components evident. I scanned the floor for stray metal. Nothing. After several minutes of tense searching, the sound had vanished completely. I retreated hastily, fumbled with the lock, and fled in my truck, the spectral scraping echoing in my mind throughout a restless night. Days later, a fresh delivery of cement necessitated help. I enlisted my friend, Julian, arranging to meet him after work, around 7 in the evening. As we drove over together, I hesitantly recounted the nocturnal sounds. Julian chuckled, dismissing it easily. "Probably a loose gate somewhere, Eli," he offered, "or a bit of flashing vibrating in the wind." His skepticism made me feel vaguely foolish, yet his presence was a comfort. We arrived, unlocked the groaning door, and activated the lights. The warehouse presented its usual impassive face. Shelves orderly, floor clear, the air still. We hefted the first 2 50-pound bags inside. As we maneuvered the second onto the stack, the scraping sound returned, sharp and loud enough for both of us to stop dead. Julian's gaze met mine, his earlier amusement gone. "That's metal, all right," he conceded. "You sure there isn't a side door rattling?" I gestured towards the solid walls. "Just the main entrance. Everything else is sealed tight." We lowered the bags. Julian produced his phone, its flashlight beam cutting a sharp cone in the dimness. We moved cautiously towards the far aisle, the suspected origin point, our footfalls unnaturally loud in the charged silence. Tension coiled in my stomach, sweat beaded on my palms. I felt wired, anticipating something. Reaching the spot, we were met with absolute quiet. Julian swept his light across the concrete floor, up the towering shelves, along the bare walls. Nothing out of place. We stood for a long minute, listening. No scraping, no squeaking, nothing but the low hum of the lights. We tried tapping the shelves, kicking lightly at the floor, futile attempts to replicate the noise. "Quiet now," Julian observed. "Maybe a loose fixture overhead?" We craned our necks. The fluorescent tubes appeared securely mounted. The silence felt absolute, heavy. Defeated, we turned back towards the entrance. The moment we reached the main door, the scraping commenced anew. This time, it felt more insistent. A slow, deliberate scrape, pause, scrape of metal on concrete. Julian and I exchanged a wide-eyed look. Gooseflesh prickled along my arms. "Okay," he muttered, his voice low. "That's not normal." A cold dread solidified within me. We both spun around simultaneously, and the sound instantly ceased. We waited, frozen for several heartbeats, caught between the urge to investigate and the primal instinct to flee. My breathing grew shallow, my hands felt icy. "Let's just check one more time," Julian proposed, though his voice lacked conviction. We retraced our steps into the corridor's mouth. Again, utter silence. No movement, no clatter, no rasp. The shelves stood like silent sentinels. I nudged one with my boot. It remained stubbornly inert. Julian and I looked at each other, a shared expression of frustration and deepening unease. We turned, decisively this time, towards escape. Instantly, as if triggered by our retreat, the sound exploded. Louder, more sustained, echoing relentlessly through the aisles, seeming to emanate from everywhere and nowhere at once. The unmistakable torment of heavy chain dragged across the rough floor. We both flinched, stopping short. Julian swore under his breath. Adrenaline surged through me, tightening every muscle. I scanned wildly, trying to pinpoint the source, but the sound seemed omnipresent, inescapable. That was the breaking point. "Let's get out of here," I choked out. Julian needed no convincing. We practically sprinted to the truck, my fingers fumbling with the key as I slammed the padlock shut. Inside the cab, we sat for a moment in stunned silence, chests heaving. Julian shook his head slowly. "I don't know what the hell that is, Eli," he finally said, "but I'm not setting foot back in there after dark." I nodded mutely. My mind scrambled for logical culprits, resonant pipes within the walls. But the sound was too harsh, too deliberate. A nocturnal animal? Unlikely, given the metallic quality and the echoing resonance. It felt responsive, aware. That thought chilled me more profoundly than the sound itself. In the ensuing days, I restricted my visits to daylight hours. Under the sun, the warehouse reverted to its mundane self, utterly normal. The unsettling sounds never manifested. My materials remained untouched, the locks inviolate. I even conducted a thorough inspection of the walls, searching for hidden vents or structural oddities that might explain nocturnal acoustics. Nothing. I broached the subject with Silas, the landlord. He feigned surprise. claiming complete ignorance of any strange noises or prior complaints. He offered, rather coolly, to let me terminate the lease, forfeiting the deposit. Unwilling to hemorrhage the money, I resolved simply to avoid the place at night, the path of least resistance. Julian, however, remained steadfast in his refusal to accompany me after sunset. He'd jest about ghosts, but the underlying discomfort was genuine. I couldn't fault him. Sometimes I attempt to impose reason upon it. Steel and concrete structures contract and expand with temperature shifts, particularly at night. Perhaps this generates friction, resonant sounds, yet that fails to explain the sound's consistent localization, its unnerving tendency to begin and cease in perfect synchrony with my movements, especially near the exit. A structural anomaly I've overlooked, maybe. The notion of installing audio-equipped cameras has occurred to me, a way to capture objective evidence. But the inertia of unease has kept me from acting on it. I continue to utilize the space for its intended purpose, but strictly adhere to a self-imposed curfew. Arrive after sunrise, depart before sunset. If circumstances prevent a daytime visit, the task waits. I have no desire to confront that sound again, certainly not in solitude. Call it cowardice, I call it prudence. That grating metallic signature remains etched in my auditory memory. My schedule is now dictated by the sun. Weeks have passed without incident, without hearing the noise. Occasionally, a flicker of doubt arises. Did I exaggerate? Did Julian and I succumb to shared paranoia? But the memory is too vivid, the shared terror too palpable. I still yearn for a simple mechanical explanation. A loose pipe finally identified, an electrical fault rectified, but proof remains elusive. There is no dramatic crescendo to this narrative, no spectral reveal. Nothing has lunged from the shadows. No intruders, human or animal, have been discovered amongst the shelves. Yet, recalling the way that scraping pursuit dogged our steps down the aisle that night sends an involuntary shiver down my spine. It was real enough to make two grown men abandon their task and flee. That stark reality is undeniable, even if its cause remains stubbornly inexplicable. So, this is the uneasy truce. A warehouse, rented for the most practical of reasons, utterly commonplace by day. But after dark, it holds that echoing scrape, a sound without a source, seemingly reactive, wholly unsettling. I don't know its origin, nor why it plays its unnerving game. I only know it exists, and I possess zero inclination to return after nightfall to unravel its mystery. For now, distance after dusk is my chosen strategy. Forgetting the sound that lingers, a faint metallic tinnitus in the quiet corners of my mind, remains the goal. Hindsight paints phantoms in familiar faces. Seraphina's smile, in memory, is a predator's grin. At the time, though, blinded by the sheer sensory overload of arriving, eager for connection in that sprawling kinetic metropolis, I failed to register the dissonance humming beneath her surface. Bangkok had held me in its feverish embrace for 3 days, a glorious, suffocating wave of heat and noise and spice that exhilarated even as it frayed my nerves raw. The relentless thrum, the jostling rivers of humanity, the fragrant assault. It was intoxicating, yes, but utterly draining. That evening, retreating from the vibrant chaos of sightseeing, sweat-slicked and weary to the bone, I sought refuge in the humid torpor of my budget hostel's common room. A chilled drink, a moment's peace, That was the extent of my ambition. Then, as if summoned by unspoken need, Serafina materialized. A beer, beaded with condensation, extended in each hand, her grin wide, her Australian cadence a cheerful counterpoint to the city's clamor. "Reckon you could use one of these?" she offered, pushing a bottle towards me. Gratefully, I took it, the cold glass a balm. Conversation flowed effortlessly, Serafina a seasoned raconteur of Southeast Asian trails. Months she'd wandered, accumulating anecdotes and insider tips like exotic currency. She spoke of clandestine temples, street carts serving ambrosial noodles, bars where the city's true pulse beat, far from the tourist throngs. Hours evaporated in shared stories and laughter. Then, leaning closer, her voice dropped, a conspiratorial whisper weaving promises of authenticity. "Listen," she murmured, eyes gleaming. "There's this incredible night market, utterly off the map. No guidebooks mention it. Food to die for, crafts you won't see anywhere else. Fancy an adventure?" A flicker of hesitation, the late hour, the bone-deep fatigue. But her infectious zeal, the allure of peeling back another layer of this enigmatic city, proved irresistible. Caution, a small, insistent voice, was drowned out. "All right," I agreed, pushing aside the nascent unease. "Let's go." We hailed a tuk-tuk, a sputtering three-wheeled chariot that plunged us into the nocturnal bloodstream of Bangkok, weaving through traffic with heart-stopping agility. I registered our trajectory away from the glittering core, towards districts where the urban fabric seemed coarser, less tended. Serafina, however, maintained a bright, distracting monologue, narrating street scenes, recounting escapades in Vietnam, effectively papering over my disquiet. Eventually, the vehicle deposited us onto a street bathed in the weak glow of sparse lamps. Buildings loomed, their facades peeling like sunburnt skin. A few solitary figures drifted through the shadows, a stark contrast to the vibrant markets etched in my mind. "Are you certain this is it?" My voice betrayed my uncertainty as I scanned the subdued surroundings. Serafina nodded, her excitement undimmed, almost feverish. "Absolutely! Just down here, come on!" She tugged me into a narrow alleyway, the city's roar receding behind us. Buildings pressed close, suffocating the air, making it feel heavy, stagnant. Doubt solidified into a knot in my stomach. Just as I was about to voice my desire to turn back, the alley disgorged us into a small, dimly lit square. A handful of stalls offered unfamiliar produce. An elderly woman presided over a vast, steaming cauldron, emitting pungent, spicy aromas. It possessed none of the boisterous energy I'd envisioned. "Let's grab a drink," Serafina suggested brightly, steering me towards a shadowed alcove housing a tiny bar. "Things will liven up soon." Inside, the air was thick with unspoken histories. A couple of locals hunched over their beers in a corner, oblivious. We took stools at the bar. Serafina ordered fluently in Thai. The bartender, a burly man whose face resembled weathered leather, acknowledged with a grunt, sliding 2 glasses of clear liquid before us. "Cheers," Serafina toasted, her glass meeting mine. I took a tentative sip. The spirit seared a path down my throat, blossoming into a deceptive warmth. We talked more, Serafina spinning further tales of her travels. Yet time seemed to warp. A peculiar lethargy crept into my limbs, my thoughts becoming viscous, sluggish. The room developed a subtle sway. A glance at my watch revealed barely 30 minutes had passed. It felt like an eternity trapped in amber. "I think, need some air," I stammered, the words clumsy, my tongue thick and uncooperative. Serafina's face swam before me, her smile distorting, losing its warmth, sharpening into something predatory. "Oh, darling," her voice echoed, seeming to travel across a vast distance. "I don't believe you're going anywhere." Ice-cold panic flooded my veins as comprehension dawned with brutal clarity. The drink, laced, poisoned. I tried to rise, but my legs refused the command, turning to lead. The room tilted violently, a nauseating vortex pulling me down. Strong hands intercepted my fall. Through the rapidly encroaching fog clouding my vision, I saw the leather-faced bartender emerge. He and Serafina exchanged curt phrases in Thai, their tones chillingly pragmatic, like merchants finalizing a deal. A silent scream clawed at my throat, a desperate urge to fight, to flee, but my body was a traitor, inert. The final image imprinted on my failing consciousness was Serafina's face. The friendly mask dissolved, replaced by a chillingly detached, calculating expression, before darkness swallowed me whole. I surfaced into pain and blackness. My head hammered a brutal rhythm, my mouth was a desert, and every muscle protested with a deep, resonant ache. Movement elicited a sharper agony. My wrists and ankles were bound fast. Panic, sharp-taloned, seized my throat as fragmented memories surged back. Serafina's deceptive warmth, the shadowed bar, the insidious burn of the drugged liquor. As my eyes strained against the gloom, the contours of a small, barren room emerged. The air hung hot, stale, thick with the scent of confinement. Muffled sounds seeped in from beyond, the distant hum of traffic, perhaps, or indistinct voices. The creak of a door hinges ripped through the silence, spilling harsh fluorescent light into the space. I flinched, squinting against the sudden glare. Two figures stood silhouetted in the opening. One, unmistakably, was Serafina. The other, a man unknown to me. Tall, powerfully built, his face an impassive stone carving. "Ah!" The man's voice resonated, his English layered with a heavy accent. "Our little bird awakens." Serafina lingered near the doorway, her gaze averted. The man, Vidor, advanced, crouching before me. His rough grip seized my chin, forcing my eyes to meet his. "You have become," he stated flatly, "an inconvenience. Your embassy makes inquiries. Your family disrupts the hotels. Tedious." I strained to form words, but my tongue felt swollen, useless. A chuckle escaped him, devoid of mirth. "Do not fret. Soon you cease to be our concern. There are markets for pretty things like you. Factories, perhaps. Brothels. The demand is consistent." A wave of glacial terror washed over me, the full, monstrous reality crashing down. Not robbery, trafficking. I was inventory. Vidor rose, dusting his hands with an air of distaste. "Prepare her for transit," he instructed Serafina curtly. "The buyers arrive within the hour." The door clicked shut, plunging me back into suffocating darkness. Despair threatened to engulf me. How could I have been so utterly blind, so easily ensnared by Serafina's practiced facade? Yet, beneath the shock, a different current began to flow, a fierce, primal refusal to surrender. Ignoring the raw friction of rope against skin, I began to work frantically at my bonds. Time blurred, minutes stretching into an indeterminate agony, until finally, a subtle loosening. With a surge of desperate strength, one hand pulled free. Footsteps echoed outside. Swiftly, I tucked my liberated hand back, arranging myself to appear unchanged. The door opened again. Serafina entered, alone this time. Her eyes still refused to meet mine as she approached, carrying a plastic bottle of water. "Drink," she said, her voice toneless, devoid of inflection. "Long journey." As she leaned in, offering the bottle, I unleashed the coiled energy within me. My freed hand struck, a solid impact against her jaw. She staggered back, stunned disbelief, momentarily erasing her impassivity. I wasted no time, launching myself forward, driving her to the floor. We wrestled in grim silence, a desperate, close-quarters struggle where any outcry meant summoning the others. Raw desperation fueled me. My fingers found her throat, tightening, squeezing until her resistance ceased, her eyes rolling back as she went limp beneath me. Trembling, I fumbled through her pockets, discovering a small, sharp knife. I sliced through my remaining restraints and crept to the door, listening, heart pounding against my ribs. The corridor beyond lay silent. The escape itself remains a fractured nightmare reel. Adrenaline-fueled terror propelling me through shadowed hallways, ducking into alcoves at phantom sounds, the frantic search for egress culminating in a grimy window I barely squeezed through. I ran, stumbling through unfamiliar streets, oblivious to the stares of nocturnal wanderers, until the blessed sight of a police station offered sanctuary. The ensuing days were a maelstrom. Endless questions, sterile embassy rooms, tear-choked calls relaying the impossible truth to my family. They apprehended Serafina, Vidor, the bartender. I learned I was not the first ensnared by their web, merely one of the fortunate few who had clawed their way back from the abyss. The knowledge offered little solace. Boarding the aircraft bound for home, I felt irrevocably altered, as though a vital part of me remained captive in that squalid room. My innate trust in strangers, the assumption of inherent human decency, these had been fractured beyond repair. The physical marks left by the ropes faded long ago, but the internal landscape bears permanent scars. I still navigate the world, still yearn for connection and discovery, yet a sentinel now stands perpetual guard within me, scanning every friendly smile for the glint of danger beneath. For I learned, in the most brutal fashion, that the most insidious predators often approach with open arms, whispering promises of adventure. The precise evening my chronometric sleep monitor, a sleek shard of obsidian glass and silicon, first chronicled hours of spectral activity while my conscious self lay submerged in profound slumber. That was the evening the familiar architecture of my world began to warp. As these clandestine nocturnal ballets intensified, my questioning spiraled beyond mere sanity, probing the very weave of existence. A lifelong acolyte of the digital frontier, I embraced each new gadget, each novel application, with fervent curiosity. Thus, when a revolutionary sleep analysis program materialized in the App Store, promising unparalleled insights into the cryptic landscapes of rest, its download was instantaneous, its interface a minimalist marvel. its capabilities, ostensibly profound, leveraging my phone's subtle senses to chart the ebb and flow of movement, the whispers and sighs of the night, rendering intricate cartographies of my sleep cycles. For weeks, normalcy reigned. The data depicted a predictable descent into oblivion around the 11th hour, a rhythmic passage through gossamer and leaden sleep phases, punctuated by faint stirrings, culminating in a placid awakening to the 7 a.m. chime. This digital reflection mirrored my corporeal reality, days imbued with vitality, nights seemingly restorative. Then arrived the pivotal night. Slumber claimed me effortlessly at the customary hour. Dawn found me refreshed, poised for the day's unfolding. Yet the app's morning report delivered a chilling dissonance. According to its meticulous record, a phantom Elias had navigated nearly 3 hours of wakefulness deep within the night's heart. The graph spiked with motion signatures consistent with perambulation, suggesting excursions beyond the bedroom's confines. Audio logs captured bursts of sound, phantom conversations uttered into the void. Of this, I recalled nothing. My memory insisted on unbroken, profound sleep. A glitch, I assured myself, a phantom in the machine. Software errs, algorithms falter, yet an insidious doubt coiled in the recesses of my mind. My old webcam, resurrected from dusty retirement, found a new perch, its unblinking eye trained upon my bed. Should the anomaly recur, digital proof would be mine. Several nights unfurled uneventfully. The app echoed the webcam's visual narrative. Elias Thorne, recumbent, still save for the occasional tectonic shift beneath the duvet. And then it manifested anew. The application logged over 2 hours of clandestine motion. With hands that trembled like seismographs, I summoned the webcam's chronicle. The ensuing spectacle shattered reason. The footage revealed me, Elias, sitting bolt upright near 2 a.m., eyes wide yet vacant, portals to nowhere. Horror held me captive as this simulacrum of myself rose, gliding out of the frame's embrace. For the subsequent 2 hours, this nocturnal counterpart periodically materialized, rearranging objects with cryptic intent, settling at my desk to scroll characters illegible in the playback's resolution, engaging in animated discourse with an unseen interlocutor. At precisely 4:17 a.m., the spectral Elias returned to bed, assuming the exact posture I'd later awaken in. Eyes fluttered shut, stillness descended. My grasp on reality felt tenuous, frayed. How could such elaborate choreography unfold beyond the veil of my awareness? Somnambulism? My history held no precedent, and this felt infinitely more complex, more purposeful than mere sleepwalking. A desperate hunger for answers ignited a technological escalation. My apartment bloomed with electronic sentinels, additional cameras mapping blind spots, motion detectors tracing unseen paths, sensitive microphones straining for whispers, even an infrared lens peering into the thermal dark. I resolved to ensnare every fragment of this nocturnal enigma. Night after night, the pattern etched itself deeper. I would surrender to sleep, and my shadow self would stir, navigating the apartment with an unnerving deliberation. Sometimes, pages filled with script emerged by dawn, dense concatenations of numerals and symbols resembling arcane code, belonging to no programming language I could identify. On other nights, belongings were sculpted into bizarre, transient installations, only to be meticulously restored to their mundane positions before sunrise. Most disquieting were the conversations. The cameras captured me gesticulating, arguing, pleading with the empty air, while the audio recordings preserved my voice, yet twisted, submerged, speaking in a fractured lexicon that defied comprehension. The mystery became my obsession. Days dissolved into fevered analysis of the recordings, frantic attempts to decrypt the glyphic writings, relentless research into every conceivable pathology, neurological, psychological, even venturing into the shadowed realms of the paranormal. Consultations with physicians, sleep savants, and investigators of the uncanny yielded only sympathetic shrugs and baffled silence. Sleep deprivation etched dark crescents beneath my eyes. My professional life faltered. Connections with friends grew strained under the weight of my increasingly erratic preoccupation. How could I articulate the impossible without sounding utterly unmoored? Weeks bled into months. The nocturnal activities escalated in complexity and scale. I'd awakened to find elaborate diagrams unfurled across my walls like alien blueprints, my furniture contorted into intricate Euclidean formations. Once, my laptop greeted me, open to a document brimming with equations of advanced theoretical physics, concepts far exceeding my grasp. Sleep transformed from sanctuary to abyss. Each night became a battle against encroaching exhaustion, a terrified vigil against the potential actions of my other self. Inevitably, fatigue conquered, and dawn would unveil fresh enigmas. Then came the night that fractured everything. I surfaced into chaos, an apartment ravaged far beyond previous incursions. Books lay eviscerated, their pages adhered to the walls in a macabre decoupage. My electronics were brutally disassembled, their intricate guts scattered like technological entrails. And at the epicenter, rendered in a substance disturbingly evocative of dried blood, pulsed a complex, unfamiliar sigil. Panic seized me. I scrambled to the surveillance feed. The footage depicted a maelstrom of activity. Me, moving with preternatural velocity, eyes emitting an eerie cerulean glow under the infrared gaze. At one juncture, this entity locked eyes with the camera lens, its face a mask of raw desperation and terror. "They're coming!" it rasped, the voice undeniably mine, yet alien, the first comprehensible words salvaged from the nightly static. "We have to prepare. It's almost time." I recoiled, my thoughts a chaotic vortex. Who were they? Preparation for what? And who, or what, was this nocturnal usurper inhabiting my form? As I grappled with the impossible, a searing pain lanced through my skull. Visions erupted behind my eyes, alien vistas unfurling, grotesque fauna shifting through impossible geometries, technologies light years beyond human conception. For a fleeting, terrifying moment, the dam broke. I remembered. I was not merely Elias Thorne. I was a fragment of a vaster consciousness, a being straddling multiple dimensions. My nighttime excursions were no pathology. They were desperate transmissions across the interdimensional membrane, attempts to warn this iteration of myself of an imminent existential threat. The pain receded, the torrent of memories dwindling to echoes, yet the conviction remained, stark and absolute. Something vast and terrible approached, a force threatening to unravel not just my existence, but the very fabric of consensus reality. From that dawn forward, my resistance ceased. I became a collaborator with my nocturnal self. Notebooks and styluses were left accessible. Recording equipment was upgraded, optimized. I delved into lucid dreaming techniques, seeking to consciously bridge the chasm between my waking and sleeping awareness. Slowly, painstakingly, fragments began to coalesce. The cryptic codes, subjected to cutting-edge AI analysis, yielded glimpses of hyper-advanced scientific principles. The diagrams and equations hinted at revolutionary physics, concepts that fundamentally challenged established cosmology. Through shadowed corners of the internet, I found others, scattered souls reporting synchronous phenomena. Together, we assembled a mosaic of chilling premonition. Our reality teetered on the precipice of a trans-dimensional cataclysm, an event poised to shred the continuity of existence. And we, improbably, were nodes in a network chosen, or perhaps afflicted, to avert it. Our sleeping selves acted as conduits, receiving data, schematics, warnings from elsewhere. The monumental challenge lay in translating this deluge of alien information into actionable knowledge for our bewildered waking minds. As the forecasted date of convergence loomed, the nightly activities reached a fever pitch. I would awaken to find my apartment transformed into a bewildering, ad hoc laboratory, cluttered with jury-rigged contraptions humming with unknown energies. My body bore the aches of exertions forgotten by morning. My mind thrummed with half-formed concepts and urgent, non-negotiable imperatives. The final night descended. Our collective, fragmented knowledge indicated this was the nexus point, the moment the veil between dimensions would thin to its most permeable membrane. This was our solitary window to intervene. Fear warred with a strange, exhilarating anticipation as I surrendered to sleep that night, whispering a silent plea into the darkness. Remember, succeed, save us. I awoke. Sunlight streamed through the window. My apartment was normal, pristine. No arcane devices, no cryptic graffiti. A cold dread washed over me. Had we failed? Then my eyes fell upon the date displayed on my phone. Impossibly, irrevocably, it was yesterday. We had done it. Somehow, against all conceivable odds, time itself had been bent, anchored anew. The crisis, the unraveling, had been averted. In the subsequent days, the nocturnal mysteries vanished. My sleep app reverted to charting placid, unremarkable slumber. The cameras captured only stillness. It was as though those months of escalating dread and cosmic revelation had been nothing more than an elaborate shared hallucination. But the knowledge remained, seared into my core. Somewhere, across dimensional thresholds I could no longer perceive, another Elias stood sentinel, a silent guardian ready to sound the alarm should the shadows stir again. And here, in this salvaged timeline, I was irrevocably altered. Now, as sleep's velvet curtain descends each night, I offer a quiet acknowledgement, a silent gratitude to that other self, the phantom architect of our salvation. And I drift away, wondering what other realities, what unforeseen potentials lie dormant within the uncharted depths of slumber. For I have learned irrevocably that the boundary between the dreaming mind and the waking world, between one reality and the next, is far more fragile, far more porous than we ever dared to imagine. The anomaly revealed itself on a Tuesday, unremarkable, save for the way light refused its ancient pact with shadow. My shift at the archive had begun like any other. I, Elias, was navigating the far stacks, a trolley laden with brittle journals groaning beside me. Familiarity coated everything until my gaze dropped. Beneath my feet, the linoleum tiles glared back, uninterrupted. I wasn't there, or rather, my silhouette wasn't. Crouching, I scrutinized the floor. The overhead fluorescents hummed their stark, unwavering tune, yet cast no darkness from my form. A quick glance confirmed it. The towering shelves stood stark and two-dimensional, their bulk failing to imprint upon the floor. The light clinging to the spines of ancient books seemed flat, devoid of depth. A chill, sharp and sudden, pricked the nape of my neck. I abandoned the aisle with undue haste, retreating to the circulation desk. The mundane rhythm of checkout logs a sought-after anchor. I confided in no one. How could I articulate such a thing without sounding unhinged to Clara or the others? Yet the image persisted, a glitch in reality. Later, drawn by a morbid curiosity, I returned. The phenomenon held. No shadow tethered me to the ground. A queer buoyancy suffused my limbs. Not sickness or vertigo, but an unsettling lightness, as if my very substance had thinned. My breath seemed to escape me quicker, leaving a hollow space in my chest. The fluorescent hum persisted, though fainter now, a tired drone. My heart hammered against my ribs. My palms grew slick. 10 seconds, perhaps 15. I stood rooted, a statue in a pool of sourceless light, before fleeing again, the echo of my own pulse loud in my ears. The remainder of the day became an exercise in normalcy. Assisting researchers, reshelving returned volumes, fielding calls, the routine motions felt like a flimsy costume. My thoughts kept snagging on that shadowless patch of floor. This library, a venerable repository of forgotten lore, sprawled in labyrinthine corridors. Entire wings housed collections seldom disturbed. Vellum manuscripts, sea-stained nautical charts, reference tomes thick with the dust of decades. Whispers circulated, of course. Spectral movements glimpsed peripherally, capricious lights, echoes from the subterranean levels where dampness reigned. Such tales I'd always dismissed, content in the quietude, the unique perfume of decaying paper, my preferred solace. But the shadowless aisle, it possessed a tangible wrongness, an impossibility that burrowed under the skin. Dawn broke, and with it, resolve. After clocking in, ensuring the front desk was untroubled by immediate need, I ventured toward the restricted zone, repository of the truly ancient texts. At the threshold of that aisle, I hesitated. The lights buzzed, a low thrum vibrating the air, illuminating motes of dust dancing in the stillness. A constriction tightened my chest. One step, then another. My eyes remained fixed on the floor, seeking the absent dark twin that should follow my feet. Nothing. I waved my hands, lifted them towards the looming shelves, blank space beneath. The floor remained uniformly bright, the polished wood of the shelves stark, unburdened by umbra. It was as if light emanated from everywhere and nowhere, erasing dimension. A dry swallow scraped my throat. Cold sweat beaded on my brow. My purpose shifted. Find an explanation, a label, anything. Deeper I went, scanning spines weathered by time. A small metal plaque, tarnished almost to obscurity, caught my eye on a lower shelf. Tracing the faint indentations with a fingertip revealed little. The metal felt gritty beneath a shroud of dust. I selected a volume at random, its dark leather binding frayed at the corners. The title, a ghostly impression. Opening it required care. The pages, yellowed and fragile, bore handwritten script in a language utterly alien. The characters sharp-edged, angular, unlike any alphabet I knew. A peculiar pressure built behind my eyes, a phantom strain of trying to decipher the indecipherable. Nausea churned low in my gut. I slid the book back into its slot. My arms felt unnervingly weak, a fine tremor seizing my fingers. Control, I needed control. Faulty wiring, an unannounced maintenance project. Plausible deniability felt thin. Renovations in the manuscript vault were practically unheard of. As I turned to retreat, a sound, soft as falling dust, brushed my awareness. It resembled my name, Elias, but was too ephemeral to be certain. I froze, pulse leaping. A frantic scan of the surrounding stacks revealed only silence and emptiness. The light's hum seemed to swell fractionally. I strained my ears, but the whisper did not return. With deliberate steps, I walked away, each footfall unnaturally loud in the corridor, my back rigid with tension. Reaching the main hall, I encountered Clara, searching for misplaced archival boxes. "No, haven't seen them," I managed, my voice thin, reedy. I cleared my throat, forced a smile that felt brittle. In the break room, water did little to quell the frantic thudding in my chest, or the dampness clinging to my shirt. For days, I skirted the anomalous zone. Courage failed me, yet the memory festered, particularly in the vulnerable hours of night. Lying awake, staring into the domestic darkness, I'd recall the sensation of weightlessness, the stark absence of my own shadow, and goose flesh would ripple across my skin. Denial warred with the need for answers. The latter, insidious and persistent, eventually won. One evening, shift complete, armed with a heavy-duty flashlight, I returned. The library breathed the shallow quiet of impending closure. Overhead lights still burned, but the atmosphere felt muted. Reaching the threshold, I clicked off my torch. The aisle remained illuminated, shadowless. Again, the dust motes, suspended like tiny spectral entities. A familiar tightness gripped my stomach, the coppery tang of anxiety flooding my mouth. I held up a hand. Its expected silhouette failed to materialize on the bright floor. Sweat bloomed anew on my palms. I drew out another tome, this one thicker, its spine robust. Flipping through, the script seemed a chaotic melange of styles, some lines bold and declarative, others faint, receding. My eyes watered with the effort of focus. Footsteps, a soft scuff behind me. I spun around, empty air, breath hitched in my throat. My gaze fell upon a small, plain wooden door at the aisle's terminus. A storage space, perhaps. Maybe a fuse box lay within, a mundane solution. The knob was cold, unyielding beneath my touch. Locked. Kneeling, I pressed my eye to the keyhole. Utter darkness stared back. I stood, ran my hand over the rough, unfinished wood, searching for any identifying mark. Nothing. Then, the whisper, closer this time, unmistakable. Elias. A full body flinch, my mouth turned to sand. Slowly, deliberately, I backed away, fingertips brushing the unyielding door. My legs felt jittery, primed for flight, yet I held my ground, desperate for any clue, any sign of another presence. I paced the length of the aisle, peering into shadowed corners that weren't truly shadowed. The lights above seemed ordinary fixtures, yet the space they lit defied normalcy. My steps felt muffled, absorbed by the strange ambience. Wiping sweat from my forehead, I heard it. A sharp crack from behind a nearby shelf, like old wood settling violently. My flashlight beam stabbed into the gap, revealing only dusty shelf edges and a few loose yellowed pages scattered on the floor. No intruder, just the heavy pounding of my own blood in my ears. I doused the flashlight again, testing the ambient light. It felt dimmer now, weaker. My arms seemed to float, detached. An involuntary deep breath, then another, failed to steady the tremor in my knees. I retreated to the main corridor, the squeak of my shoes on the tile, a grounding sound. Under the normal hallway fluorescence, my hands looked pale, but their shadows stretched reassuringly on the wall, a sliver of relief. I fled the building soon after. The ensuing week saw me immersed in archival records, delving into the library's digital entrails for any mention of that specific aisle. I unearthed notes about ancient manuscripts, a donation from a reclusive collector decades prior. Vague references to unusual storage requirements surfaced, but nothing concrete. No maintenance logs, no lighting anomalies documented. Tentative inquiries with older colleagues yielded shrugs, evasions, or confused stares. One, Mr. Abernathy, vaguely recalled rumors about some strange texts nobody ever touched. Nothing more. But the place exerted a pull. Curiosity, or perhaps something less rational, drew me back repeatedly. Each visit took me deeper. More volumes opened, their cryptic content scanned. The script shifted, morphed, sometimes within the same page, a babel of unknowable tongues. Sporadic waves of dizziness forced me to brace against the shelves. Flashes of movement teased the periphery of my vision, gone when I turned. The silence here was different, heavy, charged, yet paradoxically thinning the air, making me feel lighter, my breathing shallow and rapid without conscious effort. Dry mouth, sweaty palms wiped on trousers, the familiar litany of unease. One evening, I lingered too long. Close-in time approached. The distant sounds of colleagues wrapping up drifted down the corridors. I needed to see. I hefted a particularly large manuscript onto a nearby wooden reading table. Neither table nor I disturbed the shadowless uniformity of the light. The soft hum seemed louder. Pages turned, brittle beneath my trembling fingers. The ink here seemed darker, almost wet, impossibly fresh despite the obvious antiquity. Leaning closer, a profound coldness radiated outwards from my chest. My arms shook violently. Vision blurred momentarily. Hand pressed to my sternum, I fought for steady breaths. Elias. Clearer now. Close. I snapped my head around. Nothing. Who's here? The question emerged as a ragged whisper into the unanswering air. A single flicker from the overhead light sent a jolt through me. Stomach plummeting, I closed the heavy book, slid it back onto its shelf. Pins and needles prickled my left foot. Towards the exit, each step felt precarious, the floor seeming to sway subtly beneath me. A faint ringing commenced in my ears. My body felt adrift within my clothes. I paused, forcing stillness, battling the rise in panic. One deliberate step, then another, eyes fixed on the distant archway leading out. The main corridor lights seemed dim, elongated. Reaching their familiar glare, I looked down. My shadow stretched before me. A welcome, solid presence. Relief washed over me, potent but incomplete. My hands still shook. I clocked out in silence. Sleep offered no refuge. Restlessness plagued me, my mind replaying the sensory strangeness of the aisle. Around midnight, parched and agitated, I rose. A plan began to form, centered on tangible proof. Perhaps the bulbs themselves were peculiar, or the shelf arrangement created an optical illusion. Tomorrow, I decided, I would bring a camera. Arriving an hour before my shift, digital camera clutched tight, I made straight for the aisle. Silence reigned, save for the low electrical thrum. I hit record, panned across the floor, my feet, the impassive shelves. The camera's small screen mirrored the pervasive brightness. No shadow. My own image appeared washed out, edges blurred, indistinct. A skipped heartbeat. I filmed on, breath shallow, darting glances into the empty space. After perhaps a minute, I paused playback, my chest constricted. The recording stopped abruptly at 15 seconds. The camera had simply shut down, battery indicator inexplicably flashing red despite a full charge. I tried again. Same result, 15 seconds, then blackness. Cursing under my breath, I tapped the camera's casing uselessly. The lens retracted with a final whir. Defeated, frustrated, fear coiling tighter, I shoved it into my pocket. Sweat trickled under my collar.
Drawn back to the table I opened. I'd previously examined. My arms felt leaden, but I compelled myself to look. The script seemed bolder, sharper than before. Page after crinkle turned, the sound loud. Quite every nerve strained until her shoulders rigid with tension ached. A rustling near my feet. I looked down. A dust mote swirled in a miniature vortex around my ankles, though no stirred the air. Heart against my ribs. A dull throb started behind my temples. I closed the book, replaced it, backed away, leaving the aisle. Felt like pushing through denser footsteps, regained the resonance. A faint pop in my right ear, like equalizing. Instant I crossed the threshold into the main corridor. Solidified, my shadow reappeared. A tingling sensation spread through my arms. My phone buzzed in my pocket, making me jump, asking where my shift had late, mumbling an apology. I the front desk.
The rest of the day passed in a haze, checking books in and out, greeting patrons, mechanical actions overlaid on a mind trapped in that silent, shadowless space. By evening, exhaustion weighed me down. Home, shower, bed. But sleep remained fractured, haunted by swirling dust and a breathless pressure in my chest. I'd wake gasping, drenched in sweat. The following afternoon, I sought out Mr. Abernathy, the senior librarian, cornering him near the administrative wing. I spoke of oddities in the old manuscript section. His frown deepened as I haltingly described the absent shadows, the peculiar light, the feeling of lightness. Suspicion clouded his gaze. Had I been unwell? Stressed? I shook my head. His response was curt. Stick to assigned duties, avoid areas outside my purview. His tone, guarded and final, hinted at knowledge deliberately withheld. I didn't push. That evening, one final time, I returned. A compulsion I couldn't name drew me back. My legs felt unsteady beneath the strange illumination. The air thinned, muscles felt weak. The silent manuscripts stood sentinel. The table waited, shadowless. A dry swallow. The whisper came again, directly beside my ear. Elias. My skin prickled violently. I jerked, dropping the flashlight. It clattered, spun, and lay still. The whisper stretched my name out, a long, weary, yet urgent sound. Elias! Thunder in my chest, mouth arid, bending to retrieve the flashlight. My hand shook uncontrollably. I scanned the aisle, desperate, terrified. Nothing visible, yet the presence felt intimate, immediate. Lungs constricted, breath coming in ragged gasps, the whoosh of my own pulse filled my ears. Reaching out, I touched the nearest shelf. Rough wood, thick dust. Elias. Quieter now, fading into the electrical hum. Enough. I turned, walked out, steps echoing, chest aching, throat raw. I didn't look back. The tingling persisted, an invisible static clinging to my skin all the way to the main doors. Outside, the late afternoon colors seemed unnaturally vivid, the sunlight a tangible warmth. Long, slow breaths filled my lungs. I still work at the archive. That aisle remains unvisited, a forbidden territory in the geography of my routine. I shelve, assist, keep to the known paths. Yet sometimes, my gaze drifts towards the corridor leading to the old manuscripts. A familiar knot tightens in my gut. The memory of weightlessness, of silence pregnant with unseen things, resurfaces. What sleeps in those books? Why do shadows flee that space? The whispered name echoes occasionally in dreams, leaving me sweat-soaked and aching, as if from a long run. I tell myself I won't return. I tell myself it's over. But the place hums in the back of my mind, an unresolved chord. It hasn't finished with me. Passing that corridor, I feel the air shift, thicken, charged with a waiting silence. For now, I endure. I work, I avoid. But I know it's there, waiting. Six weeks have unfurled since I took possession of this apartment. My name is Elias Thorne, and the law is my vocation. A discipline demanding lucidity, irrefutable evidence. I dissect clauses, scrutinize precedents. Understanding precedes commitment. Hence, the protracted 3-month quest for habitation. This place, when finally unearthed, radiated perfection. Proximity to the halls of justice, equitable rent, an interior gleaming with the promise of the untouched. A veritable coup, I surmised. Yet now, each descent into night feels less like rest and more like navigating a chasm between realities, a precarious balancing act. I intend to lay bare the sequence, unadorned, unmitigated. The inaugural day was a marathon of cardboard and exertion. Files, dense as stone tablets, and the cumbersome weight of my antique bookcase exacted their toll on my spine. Midnight had nearly struck when the last box yielded its contents. A swift, cleansing shower, then collapse onto a mattress grounded on the bare floorboards, the bed frame still a puzzle of parts. That night passed in oblivion, deep and undisturbed. Morning arrived, and the rhythm of settling in resumed. Disquiet arrived on the third night. It began mundanely enough, before the bathroom mirror, toothbrush in hand, my own reflection scrutinizing me. A faint tremor of unease rippled through me, easily attributable, I thought, to the escalating pressures of a significant case my firm had entrusted to me. Professional anxieties, perhaps. I concluded my ablutions, extinguished the light, and sought my bed. How long slumber held me remains uncertain. I only know my eyes snapped open to a profound sense of wrongness. Darkness enveloped the room, yet the space itself felt inverted, transposed. Instinctively, I reached left for the nightstand. My fingers met only void. A constriction seized my chest. I fumbled for the small lamp I kept bedside. It wasn't there. Instead, an identical lamp glowed softly on the opposing side, the wrong side. I rose, propelled by a nascent panic, and paced the apartment. The entire layout had undergone a spectral flip. Furniture occupied mirror image positions. The closet door, previously sentinel on the right of the hallway, now stood sentinel on the left. Light switches felt counterintuitive beneath my touch. The bathroom basin clung to the opposite wall. It was undeniably my apartment, yet viewed through some unseen-looking glass. Vertigo threatened, but I wrestled for composure. A dream? Its tangibility argued otherwise. The frantic thrum of my own heart, the whisper of my breath, the low drone of the refrigerator, all insisted on reality. I illuminated the kitchen, seeking further aberrations. The countertops, too, were reversed. Even the faucet handle seemed swapped, left for right. Nausea churned within me. A vivid nightmare, I desperately assured myself. Retreating to bed, forcing my eyes shut against the disorienting scene, seemed the only recourse. Perhaps waking would restore normalcy. My throat raw, I drank water before surrendering once more to sleep's embrace. Morning dawned and equilibrium returned. The nightstand resumed its rightful place. The closet door stood where it belonged. A strained laugh escaped me, though the cold perspiration tracing my neck and the lingering tightness in my chest mocked the dismissal. Stress. It had to be stress. That day, I immersed myself in work, poring over contracts until late, a deliberate bulwark against the encroaching memory of the night's distortion. But the subsequent night brought the same inversion, and the night after that. The pattern solidified. Fall asleep in the familiar, awaken adrift in its mirrored counterpart. Initially, the changes were purely spatial, a geometric anomaly. Soon, however, finer details began to subtly transmute. The prints adorning the living room walls sported unfamiliar frames, the hallway runner darkened by a shade. The bathroom tiles revealed a faint, previously unnoticed pattern. Each nocturnal awakening became a jolt of cognitive dissonance, heart hammering against ribs, skin growing clammy. An urge to flee, to burst through the door, surged within me, yet I remained rooted, paralyzed by the fear of what landscape might lie beyond the threshold. To anchor my sanity, I began conducting small experiments. One evening, I deliberately placed a glass on the coffee table. Upon waking in the reversed space, the glass sat on the diagonally opposite corner, adhering perfectly to the mirror logic. I took to chronicling the discrepancies on my phone, noting wall colors, curtain patterns, furniture placement within the nocturnal variant. Come morning, in the stable, normal apartment, I'd compare. My daytime reality remained constant. The nighttime reflection, however, subtly warped and shifted with each visit. Never a complete overhaul, but an accumulation of small, unsettling variances. The walls felt less like boundaries and more like membranes, thinning, permeable. Predictability vanished. Around the 7th or 8th night, I attempted defiance, wakefulness. Fueled by coffee, I paced the confines of my living room, even considered calling a friend, though the hour and the sheer madness of my predicament silenced me. Exhaustion gnawed, my eyelids leaden weights. Around 3 a.m., surrender was inevitable. I crumpled onto the sofa. Scarcely an hour later, consciousness returned, within the reversed apartment. My body ached, neck stiff, the sofa now occupying the room's opposite flank. A curse escaped my lips, low and bitter. I was ensnared in some perverse, architectural riddle. The alterations grew more alarming, prompting thoughts of escape. One night, the front door vanished, not relocated, simply gone. In its place stood an uninterrupted expanse of wall. My throat tightened, my palms slicked with sweat. I pressed against the plaster, solid, unyielding. No handle, no seam, no hint of egress. A frantic check confirmed the bedroom door remained functional. The realization struck with chilling force. Escape might not be an option. Trapped. The word echoed in the sudden, frantic drumming of my heart. Deep breaths, measured, deliberate. This ends with morning, I chanted inwardly. And indeed, the next day, the door reappeared in its customary place, solid and reassuring. But the memory lingered, a cold shadow. Another time, the windows themselves transformed. The familiar broad rectangles were replaced by narrow vertical slits, like apertures in a fortification. The curtains I'd hung lay pooled on the floor, useless fabric. Through the slits, I could discern the streetlights below, but their placement seemed skewed, unnatural. The usual late-night hum of traffic was absent. An unnerving silence pressed in from the outside. This emptiness amplified my anxiety, a sensation of being marooned in a derelict echo of my own neighborhood. My body remained locked in a state of low-grade panic, stomach clenched, limbs trembling faintly. I employed various stratagems to break the cycle. Sleeping pills, placed strategically on the nightstand, offered the hope of prolonged unconsciousness, a way to sleep through the transition. Futile. Regardless of sedation, at some point, my eyes would inevitably open upon that reversed, uncanny space. The phenomenon persisted, indifferent to my efforts. One night in my normal apartment, I hammered a nail into the wall, a deliberate mark. Waking later in the mirrored version, I found the nail precisely replicated on the opposite wall, a testament to the bizarre consistency of the transformation. The most profound shock manifested about 3 weeks into this ordeal. I awoke, surveyed the surroundings, and noted new features in the reversed apartment. Fissures spiderwebbing across the ceiling. They hadn't been there before. Paint peeled along the cornices like sunburnt skin. A film of grime coated the walls, suggesting years of neglect. My own furniture stood shrouded in dust. Running a finger across a tabletop confirmed it, leaving a clean streak through the thick layer. My breathing quickened. It was as if this mirrored space was aging precipitously, decaying overnight. Was I glimpsing a potential future, a neglected alternate? I tried to quell the speculation, focusing solely on enduring the night. Upon returning to the normal apartment at dawn, everything was pristine, cared for. Relief washed over me, ephemeral as morning mist. The day demanded normalcy. I went to work, feigning composure. My supervisor remarked on my haggard appearance. "Working late," I mumbled, unable to confess the nightly oscillation between realities. A truth too outlandish for the rational world. A truth that could jeopardize my meticulously constructed career. A few nights later, another disturbing alteration surfaced. Within the reversed apartment, elements of my identity began to vanish. My weighty law textbooks were absent from the shelves. The framed Juris Doctor degree no longer adorned the wall. My suits had disappeared from the closet, leaving only barren hangers. A search revealed only generic clothing in the drawers. Plain shirts, nondescript trousers. Nothing bespoke my profession. This erasure unsettled me profoundly, casting doubt on my very being within that space. The line blurred. Which apartment held precedence? I fell asleep in the familiar, woke in the inverted, slept there, woke here. Daytime offered structure. Nighttime plunged me into this distorted reflection. It wasn't physically harmful, no overt menace presented itself, but the relentless uncertainty gnawed at my sanity, an insidious erosion. Long-term implications were a terrifying abyss I refused to contemplate. Coping, night by night, became the sole objective. The nadir arrived near the start of the 4th week. Awakening in the reversed apartment felt routine, yet the hallway lights flickered erratically, the bulbs appearing ancient, filmed with grime. A low electrical buzzing emanated from somewhere indeterminate. The walls seemed to press closer. The furniture lay scattered at discordant angles, the coffee table overturned, the sofa askew, the window curtains torn. A chill draft snaked from a gap beneath the solid wall where the door should have been. Still no exit. Pressing my ear to the cold plaster, I detected a faint, rhythmic dripping. Water striking metal, steady, relentless. My heart hammered in my throat. What lay beyond that barrier? I lingered, listening, hoping for clarity, but gleaned only a deeper sense of foreboding. A throb ignited behind my temples. My hands trembled. The desperate urge to escape surged, thwarted by the immutable wall. Retreat, attempt sleep again, the only strategy left. I lay on the disheveled sofa, fixated on the strobing lights overhead, skin clammy. Inhaling slowly, I clamped my eyes shut, forcing unconsciousness. My mind raced. Was I the cause? Could I accelerate the return? Was this waking, or a deeper layer of the loop? Eventually, oblivion claimed me. Consciousness returned, back in the normal apartment. My phone displayed 4:15 a.m. Dizziness, nausea, but overwhelming relief. I stumbled to the bathroom, splashed cold water on my face. My reflection stared back from the correct side of the basin. My knuckles, I noticed, were white, clenched around the countertop's edge. Deep breaths. Enough. This had to end. My resolve solidified. Pack, leave, tomorrow. Lease be damned. Sanity was non-negotiable. The following morning, I contacted a letting agent, conveying an urgent need for new accommodation. Any suitable place, immediately. She promised viewings. That evening, I dragged my suitcases into the living room, half-packed, symbols of imminent departure. I sat on the bed, flicking through television channels, battling drowsiness. The fight was valiant but ultimately lost. A blink held too long, the familiar gravitational pull into darkness. Eyes open, the reversed place. This time, a solitary suitcase stood near the phantom door zone. It resembled mine, yet aged, dilapidated. The zipper gaped, the fabric frayed. I approached. It was empty. The room itself was ravaged. Paint peeled in great swaths. The overhead light flickered incessantly, casting spastic shadows. Sofa cushions lay ripped, disgorging their stuffing. Living here was unimaginable. It felt condemned. Adrenaline surged, my breath coming in ragged gasps. I seized the derelict suitcase and hurled it against the wall where the door ought to be. A dull thud. The wall stood impassive. I hammered it again and again until pain flared in my shoulder. Futile. I retreated to the bedroom, seeking refuge. Perhaps sleep could ferry me back, but the bed was gone. The room stood utterly bare, save for a single stark chair in the corner. The window, once a source of light, was now bricked up. Claustrophobia tightened its grip. The apartment itself seemed to be actively consuming my options. My heart pounded violently, vision swimming at the periphery. Mechanically, I sank into the lone chair. My lungs felt constricted. Sleep, the only known escape route. I slumped forward, head in hands, arms trembling. The air held a tomb-like chill, raising goose flesh. Closing my eyes, I focused on the sound of my own breathing, a fragile anchor. I refused to contemplate my location, concentrating solely on the need to escape this suffocating reality. After an indeterminate passage of time, sleep mercifully intervened. Waking felt like surfacing from immense depths. My normal bedroom, my intact suitcase on the floor, clean walls, the bed correctly positioned. Relief, potent and profound. The next day, I informed the agent I'd accept the first apartment she presented. Rent, size, irrelevant. Escape was paramount. She secured a smaller place nearby, less appealing, but infinitely safer. I signed the lease that very day. Presently, I am packing, methodically, urgently. I strive to remain awake until the move is complete. Whether relocation will sever this connection, I cannot know, but inaction is unthinkable. A sense of dwindling time pervades, a fear that one more night spent within these walls might result in a permanent transition, stranding me in that decaying reflection. This is my account, stark and unresolved. There is no neat conclusion, no rational explanation uncovered. As a lawyer, I deal in certainty, yet none exists here. All that remains is instinct, primal and insistent. Get out, flee before something irreparable occurs. That is the entirety of my plan. As dawn breaks, the truck arrives. I will load my life and drive away. Should this spectral apartment attempt to reclaim me, I will resist with every fiber of my being. Another night here is not an option. May it be enough. A dry snap fractured the forest's profound quiet. Perhaps only a foraging creature, perhaps the wind testing a dead branch. But the second crack, sharp on the heels of the first, and trailed by the unmistakable cadence of whispered words, sluiced ice through my veins. We were trespassers on someone else's silence out here, and whoever shared these woods harbored no neighborly intentions. This was meant to be sanctuary, a brief absolution from the city's relentless hum. Just myself, Leo, my partner, Ilara, and our friends, Reese and Chloe. We'd sought solace in the mountains, discovered this secluded cabin via some dimly lit corner of the internet. Isolated, elemental, miles from any beaten path. The perfect vanishing point, or so our naive optimism decreed. The ascent had been effervescent with laughter, the air charged with anticipation. Our last brush with civilization was a dusty general store in a town that time seemed to have misplaced. Stocking up, we'd exchanged pleasantries with the proprietor, Silas, a man whose face bore the intricate map of decades. An odd shadow flickered in his gaze when we mentioned our destination. Not many venture that way these days, he'd murmured, concern etching deeper lines around his eyes. Not since, well, just mind yourselves here. We dismissed it then, chalking it up to rural folklore, a folly we'd come to lament bitterly. The cabin itself matched its rustic promise, a snug two-bedroom structure hunkered in a clearing, dwarfed by sentinel pines. Our first day dissolved in exploration, tracing forgotten trails, awestruck by the raw, untamed splendor of the wilderness. As twilight bled into night, we huddled by the fire pit, charring marshmallows, weaving threads of spectral tales. It wasn't until the following evening that the atmosphere began to curdle. I felt it first, an insistent prickle crawling up my spine, the sensation of unseen scrutiny. I tried to banish it, blaming Reese's lurid narratives playing tricks on an overstimulated mind. Yet the conviction of being observed, of eyes fixed upon us from the impenetrable darkness girding our small sphere of firelight, refused to yield. "Anyone else?" I began, striving for nonchalance. "Get the feeling, like we're not quite alone." Ilara offered a laugh, but it was brittle, thin. "Don't let Reese's stories spook you, Leo." Yet her gaze betrayed her, flicking nervously towards the tree line, her posture taut with unspoken tension. She felt it too. Reese surged to his feet, inflating his chest in a parody of courage. "All right, show yourself. Who's lurking out there, you phantom fiend?" His bellow ricocheted off the timber, swallowed by the woods, answered only by the fire's hungry crackle and the mournful call of a distant owl, a breath held collectively, suspended in the sudden quiet. Then Chloe screamed, a raw, tearing sound. We spun, following her pointing finger. There, limned by the fire's flickering edge, stood a presence. Tall, preternaturally still, its form a study in shadow, features obscured. For one elongated pulse of time, stillness reigned. Then, with unnerving fluidity, the figure pivoted and dissolved back into the forest's Stygian embrace. Chaos erupted. Chloe wept, anchoring herself to Reese. Ilara's fingers dug into my arm, a painful testament to her fear. "What in God's name was that?" Reese's voice climbed octaves, his bravado utterly disintegrated. "No idea," I managed, my tongue thick and dry. "But we need to be inside, right now." We hastily smothered the flames, scrambled into the cabin, the heavy thud of the bolt echoing our frantic heartbeats. Sleep was an impossibility. We huddled together in the main room, flinching at every groan of the aged timbers, every sibilant whisper of wind weaving through the pines. "Maybe just a hiker," Ilara proposed, her voice frayed. "Lost, drawn by the fire." "Then why the silence?" Chloe countered, her logic sharp despite her tears. "Why just stand there?" No one possessed an answer. Dawn's tentative light offered a fragile truce with fear. Daylight has a way of diminishing nocturnal terrors. We persuaded ourselves it was collective hysteria, fueled by sleeplessness and spectral suggestion. But when Reese ventured out for firewood, he returned moments later, sprinting, his face bleached of color. "The car!" he choked out. "The tires! Slashed!" We rushed outside. It was true. All 4 tires gaped open, deflated ruins bearing deep, deliberate wounds in their rubber flesh. Not mischief, not random damage. This was targeted. "We have to leave," Ilara stated, her voice trembling but firm. "Call someone." My phone, however, displayed only stark indifference. No service. A quick check confirmed our technological isolation. "Right," I said, marshalling a semblance of calm. "Okay, we can manage. That store, Silas, it's maybe 10 miles back. We can hike it before dusk." The prospect of the trek elicited no enthusiasm, only grim acceptance. It was our sole recourse. Packing essentials, we set off. The morning sun offering little warmth against the icy dread that had become our constant companion. Perhaps an hour into our forced march, we heard it. The definitive crack of a twig, underfoot, somewhere behind us. We froze in unison, turning with agonizing slowness. Nothing but the dense tapestry of trees and undergrowth met our eyes. Yet I'd stake my life I saw it. A flicker of motion, a fleeting darkness vanishing behind a thick trunk. "Faster," I urged, my voice a low, tense whisper. We accelerated, conversation abandoned, every nerve straining to catch the slightest hint of pursuit. The forest, so enchanting mere hours ago, now felt suffocating, pregnant with unseen menace. It was Ilara who noticed the structure first, nestled off the trail, partially veiled by unruly vegetation. Not our rental, this cabin was older, visibly succumbing to time and neglect, but it represented shelter, a concept that had suddenly become paramount. We approached with caution. The door hung slightly ajar, groaning rhythmically with the breeze. Inside, the air was thick with dust and the scent of decay. "Hello?" I called into the gloom. "Anyone home?" Only silence responded. Stepping over the threshold, our footfalls resonated unnervingly in the stagnant air. Decades of disuse lay heavy on the place. Furniture shrouded in ghostly sheets, cobwebs draping every corner like macabre decorations. "Look at this," Reese murmured, gesturing towards a faded photograph tacked to the wall. "Isn't that Silas from the store?" We gathered close. The image captured several men posed before this very cabin, rifles held casually, smiles fixed on their faces. Silas was there, undeniably him, though younger by decades, and beside him... "Oh God," Chloe breathed. The figure at the end of the line seemed subtly wrong, taller than the others, its features indistinct, blurred as though caught mid-movement. Yet the unnaturally slender, elongated silhouette was chillingly familiar. A floorboard protested behind us. We spun as one. Silas stood framed in the doorway, a weathered shotgun resting easily in his grip. "You folks shouldn't have come here," he stated, his tone heavy with grim finality. "This place ain't safe." A moment stretched, thick with unspoken fear. Then the questions tumbled out, about the pursuit, the figure, the photograph, the suffocating wrongness of it all. Silas let out a long, weary sigh, the years suddenly settling upon him like a shroud. "It's a long tale," he admitted, "and not one you'll find comforting." He spoke of the valley's shadowed past, of a sect that once dwelled deep within these woods, their devotion bent towards unspeakable rites, offering sacrifices to some abhorrent entity they worshipped. He recounted how the townsfolk, pushed beyond endurance, finally united, driving them out, razing their enclaves, eliminating any acolytes they could find. But their leader, Silas continued, his gaze lost in the haunted corridors of memory. He was different, changed, maybe never entirely human to begin with. We couldn't put him down, try as we might, so we bound him, trapped him in these woods using blood, using old ways. He nodded towards the photograph. That was taken the day after. We figured it done. But every so often, strangers come up, folks who don't know the history, and he senses them, hunts them, feeds on their fear, their suffering, trying to gather strength, break the binding. We absorbed his words in stunned, horrified silence. It bordered on madness, an affront to reason. Yet, after the night we'd endured, the figure we'd witnessed, could we truly dismiss it? "So, what now?" I asked, my voice raspy. Silas's expression hardened into resolve. "Now, we get you clear of these woods. Then we make damn sure nobody else wanders into his domain ever again." The journey that followed remains etched in my memory as pure, undiluted terror. Every dancing shadow seemed poised to coalesce into threat, every rustle of leaves a prelude to attack. Silas moved ahead, shotgun poised, his eyes constantly sweeping the dense periphery. We were agonizingly close to the road, salvation almost within reach, when the sound ripped through the trees, a howl unlike anything wrought by beast or man, a primal scream saturated with ancient rage, insatiable hunger, and an alien wrongness that clawed at the soul. "Run!" Silas roared. And we ran, blindly, stumbling, branches lashing like whips, roots grasping like skeletal fingers. Behind us, the crashing pursuit through the undergrowth grew terrifyingly louder. We burst from the tree line onto the gravel road, just as the headlights of a truck rounded the distant bend. Silas raised his shotgun, firing a blast into the air. Tires screamed on the gravel as the truck lurched to a stop. "In the back!" he yelled, shoving us towards the vehicle. "Go! Now!" We scrambled into the truck bed as it fishtailed, accelerating away. I risked one last glance back towards the oppressive woods. There, standing sentinel at the edge of the trees, was the figure, impossibly tall and thin, its arms disturbingly long, its face a vortex of indistinct features. It lifted one elongated hand, a gesture that could have been farewell or curse. Then the truck swung around a curve, and the forest reclaimed its secret. We never returned. Silas ensured the rental listing vanished. The access road became impassable. He vowed he would stand guard, prevent others from straying into the entity's reach. Sometimes, in the deepest hours of the night, that unearthly howl still echoes in the architecture of my dreams. I wake drenched in cold sweat, the oppressive weight of those woods, the image of that figure, terrifyingly vivid, and the question lingers, cold and persistent. Is it still there, pacing the bounds of its prison, waiting? And what happens when Silas is no longer the gatekeeper, when no one remains to warn the unwary away? It's an answer I pray I never live to discover.